Welcome back to Void Signal. You are the listener, and I am Brian Prime. On today's episode, I'm joined by artist Nate Jones. Nate is a printmaker, illustrator, musician, and convention artist whose distinctive typographic portraits and politically charged artwork have earned him a dedicated following. It's multimodal and challenging. We talk about his journey from art school and punk bands to building a career as a full-time artist, the challenges facing many working creatives these days, the rise of AI-generated art, political expression through artwork, horror films, music, and what it means to make meaningful things in a world increasingly filled with noise. You can find Nate's art, along with really rad merch, over at natejonesdesign.net. Thank you as always to Processor for providing Void Signal's theme song. You can find Processor at processor2.bandcamp.com or search on your preferred streaming platform. I must also remind you once again that Void Signal is ad-free because it's made for the enjoyment of humans. If you're a human and you've enjoyed the sound of this human's voice, Void Signal is people-powered, and I could use your support. So please visit voidsignal.net or patreon.com/voidsignal and sign up. You can quit after a month if you want. Just give me some dollars. But seriously, thank you for your consideration. It really makes a difference in helping to do this. Okay, our time is at an end. Until next time, I'm going to have to ask you to stay safe and stay loud. Welcome to Void Signal. I'm your host, Brian Prime. I'm joined by Nathan Jones. You are an artist. You have been making art for a little time now, and you were in a band previously. So just to sort of, for people who might not know you or have any idea who you are, could you just tell me a little bit about you and kind of how you got started, what led you to the path that you're on? Could you just tell me a little bit about sort of where you came from and how you ended up being an artist?
I went to school for art and I studied lithography, printmaking, so like woodcuts, LM cuts, etching, engraving, stone lithography, photolithography, not silkscreen, but a healthy amount of other disciplines. And I was doing some minoring in painting as well and drawing. And I got out of that. And like one does in art school, you meet a bunch of people who want to play music instead. So I did that for years with a band called Kentucky Knife Fight, and then a band called Sorry Scout after that. And the first band kind of ended around like 2014, and I kind of found myself having a little bit more free time, and I was still working at a service industry job position as a barista, and doing some like little freelance like web design here, a little bit of like poster design there on the side for a few years. And then 2016 rolled around, and a friend of mine was like, "Hey, you want to go in on this table at this Comic-Con," which at the time it was Wizard World, which is a now defunct Comic-Con promoter. They used to be Wizard World, but I think they lost. I'm not sure if they went bankrupt, but they sold the company to, I want to say, Fan Expo, and Fan Expo has been running them ever since. My friend wanted to go in on a 6-foot table, and I'm like, sure, I just need to get artwork going. And I didn't really have too much like available. I had some like, band posters, some personal work, artwork, but nothing I was really planning on being like a series. And I was kind of in the midst of figuring out what that was going to be. And I ended up kind of settling on a style in which that I'd already kind of utilized for commissions previously in like just months past. It was my dad's 70th birthday. So I drew his hairline and his mustache. He has a Fu Manchu mustache. And then just threw like some really cheesy, like it's like the man, the myth, the mustache. And,
Sure.
And that was done with a very, stock typeface at the time. And I just kind of like, it is the same concept as what I'm doing now, but it was just very kind of the beginning of it, the inklings of it. So then I ended up doing that I came back to that, and I just kind of threw together a piece that involved David Bowie, the way he looks on the Aladdin Insane cover with the lightning bolt and the red hair. And that ended up being very much received very positively from friends and family. And then I ended up actually being part of like some Bowie tributes and getting hired to make some, multiple different versions of Bowie throughout the years with text in the face to represent the song. And it wasn't as, I'll say it wasn't super detailed, but like it was fun to do that. And then in the midst of that, I started just doing like white background text in an area where the face, like instead of a representation of eyes, nose, mouth, there is just text of the quote of this character. Sometimes it's non-fictional and a real life person. And other times it's, you know, a literary quote from a literary character, book, anime, movie, TV show, that kind of thing. And I ended up doing that and then still selling some original art too. And then going to Wizard World in like a few months later in April. And I had like my first series, which was like 25 pieces that I had, which wasn't a lot. And my friend who wanted to split a table kind of ended up backing out only because she just didn't have the time because she had a day job. So she didn't really have the time to make new stuff. And so I was like, okay, that's cool. I'll just take it over myself. And she ended up helping me. Her name's Vanessa. She's awesome. But she ended up helping me run the booth for that weekend. And it was kind of crazy because, I mean, it wasn't insanely successful, but I was just like, you know, counting money at the end of the show. And I'm like, you mean I could just do Comic-Cons? I could just go to Comic-Cons and sell artwork? And that became a very valid form. And I think within the next week, I did another show in Madison, Wisconsin that wasn't as successful, but still pretty fun. I met some people who have long since become industry friends and folks who I've hung out with since then and roomed with and, you know, just been a part of their like Comic-Con family for years. And that it kind of kickstarted it. And within like a week after that, I quit my day job. I'm just like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like I'd been like slinging coffee for like, at that point, I think it was like 6.5 years at that spot. I'm not going to get too in the weeds here, but I will say I was as someone who was always asking to, you know, off time to go tour. It wasn't too much of a stretch to be like, hey, I just need this weekend off so I can go, you know, sell artwork. And then, so I did that a few times, but then I was like, I don't need to do this job anymore. I'm going to take the leap. I didn't have a whole lot of money at the time, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to book more shows, get out and do more. And then I started doing that on both a local basis around St. Louis is where I was living at the time. And also actually, you know, driving to places like Cleveland, Columbus, Kansas City, just slowly starting to expand like a web out from St. Louis in order to find different places, which really, I mean, if you are in a band at all and you tour, this is a very similar thing where you're just finding places that don't take too long to get to. And if it takes over, like some people have their cutoff at 5 hours, I don't mind driving a car, maybe 8 hours, maybe
Right.
max. Maybe 8-9 hours is as much as I'll go. And then after that, I'll consider maybe if it's going to be 10 hours or more on the drive. It's like, yeah, maybe I should just go ahead and get everything packed in the suitcases and go on a flight, book a flight to go to some of these cons. And so I started doing that a lot more recently. But I mean, it just ended up being something that was kind of like music, where you kind of go on a little tour. You kind of go here for a weekend, go here for a weekend, have the time in between to prep, you know, do inventory, work on art in the interim, and then go sell it at these shows. I think the difference is that you're actually making money, whereas with music, it's like it takes a long time to break even, and then even then you're just like, that's it.
Yeah.
I think most successful artists are still are just barely paying bills, which is really sad, and that's a whole thing that we can talk about later because AI is screwing up the music industry and art. I would say more apparent, I think, with music and streaming. But I mean, that's just like also the costs venues. And there's costs for doing what I do. I mean, they've all gone up too. A lot of people are really not happy with the fact that these promoters who run these venues every year just jack it up. I was told back in the day that New York Comic Con in the 90s was like a $60 table. Do you know how much it is now?
No, I have no idea.
So Artist Alley and vendor booths are two different kind of categories. If you're a vendor booth, you can sell like licensed material or your own artwork. You can do that. That's kind of the go-to for a lot of us because in some of these shows, this one specifically, New York, a lot of the ones owned by Reed Pop and some other Gen Cons kind of like this too, they're juried. So they'll determine whether or not they think that your art is a good fit. And so you can apply to be in the Artist Alley, but that doesn't always guarantee you a spot. It costs more to be in the vendor section, but at least you're guaranteed, you know, a spot at the show.
Gotcha. So it sounds sort of based on what you've said that you sort of just kind of fell into this of like, oh, this is a thing I already like doing. And, I can make some money from it and make a living off of it, which is, extremely important. And like you said, a lot of musician gigs don't really pay that well. I mean, I know plenty of musicians who would echo your sentiments wholeheartedly of just like, yeah, the pay is not great and it takes forever to break even. And even then you have to weigh cost versus benefit and, so many other things. But you had a background in art, it sounds like. So using that as a basis, as like a jumping off point, what advice do you think you would give do you have any sort of advice that you would offer to people like yourself who they love art, whether that be music or just drawing it or whatever, or just creating it in some way? What kind of advice would you have to offer as far as that goes?
Well, a lot of people say you can kind of get your foot in the door, and I've heard in music sometimes this works, but doing, fan art, music could be the equivalent of like, covers. But I'm not going to say or naysay that approach. Obviously, that's kind of how I started. But I think trying to find a niche that works as far as like an aesthetic, a concept for your pieces, a way to present that concept that, unfortunately we have to constantly double check our work to make sure it's obviously aesthetically pleasing and it pleases the eye, but also, is it marketable? Is it something that someone's going to want to put up, as a sticker on their water bottle, on a t-shirt, in their home? Initially, I was only selling prints, and I didn't really start even selling t-shirts until last year around this time. But yeah, that's kind of an approach where you can work on kind of building out an aesthetic. Maybe with some fan art, you can do maybe a mashup involving characters. You can kind of cultivate a style and work with pre-existing characters. But then I think it's also extremely important to maybe have this style work for your own either original characters. You could have a series that involves that, or just an original approach that is not too far off in stylistically from what you're doing with your fan art, and go from there. It also is going to require some startup money as far as like getting into these shows. And like I said, they are more expensive than they've ever been. New York Comic Con now costs almost $3,000 for a 10x10 booth, and they don't give you chairs or tables. You have to rent those. Yeah. So and that's the biggest one, of course. I think most shows are cheaper usually. Some of them have unfortunately gone up in price for shows that used to maybe be like $500 for a booth space are now like almost $1,000, $800, upper hundreds. I just recently moved to Chicago, so I'm trying to be more cognizant of and giving some time to apply for Chicago shows and shows in the area. But I mean, when I started, yeah, I did a few out of town shows, but I supplemented that with a lot of local shows. Like I was in St. Louis, which is a small city of sorts, but there were farmers markets. There were different kind of events where they had vendors apply and be part of. There was like a print bazaar that happened every holidays, where there's just like a congregation of a bunch of different artists selling their wares. And then, I don't know, there were just different opportunities. So kind of seeking out those opportunities that are local to maybe test run whether or not something's going to work, or whether or not, or even, it serves twofold. It's a test run to see if the product is going to work, but it's also a test run where it's a way to, make that money to save up for more shows. So that way, at least you have that as like a buoy, and then you keep, slowly expanding your reach in terms of different cities you're going to go to, but also try to find more local shows so you can do those on the offset, so you don't have to be paying for all these really expensive shows, because usually they're much cheaper, much lower bar of entry, not as high-end jury depending on the show and depending on the aesthetics of the show.
And real quick, because excuse me, there's a lot I want to talk to you about, but I did want to sort of pick your brain a little bit about your particular style. But what made you decide to, or what influenced your decision to, I'm going to combine a portrait of a person or a character with something they said. And it's very visually striking. And honestly, it's a thing that sort of drew me to your work from the outset. Not only your willingness to be candid and speak your mind about things, which I always admire, but what made you decide to incorporate, like, oh, I'm going to put a quote as like this character's face to, what was the thought process behind that?
Came out of like the success, I would say, the feedback, all the positive feedback I was getting from that first piece, the David Bowie piece. And I was like, oh, well, maybe this is an interesting way to go about doing this. And I kind of, after that, did some X-Men pieces, like a Omar from The Wire. I would end up doing like a James Baldwin piece. So I did some more like literary pieces involving authors. And I just kind of took off from there. And it's like people seem to enjoy it. So I was able to bust them out relatively quickly. I didn't have a whole lot of details going on in the background. That's changed a lot. And I'm actually kind of in the midst of trying to curtail the amount of details and kind of bring it more back to like a graphical focus on the pieces. You probably saw that with the more recent Fallout piece. And if they want to, I mean, obviously you're going to link in the stuff so people can kind of go get an idea of what I'm talking about. I think it was a combination of both online feedback. I will say it was a lot easier to get that kind of positive feedback in 2016. You know, like I feel like the same kind of post today, just a static image, is a little bit harder. It's a harder sell already. Like you can get people to like it. You can sell stuff, based off of how that performs, but it almost works better if you figured out ways to like, I'm not an animator. I would love to learn how to do some very simple animations for some pieces. I think it'd behoove me, but I think that actually would really behoove a lot of artists to learn like very simple animations, even if it's just like a 1, 2, maybe 3 frame tops animation of a character. I think if you do something like that, then that can kind of be a way to create video content that could potentially work to kind of get people like it would work as an ancillary piece. So like your art is not like, the piece, the actual print or the sticker is not the point of the post. It's more like something with that character. And a lot of people do this. You probably seen it too, with really cute like drawings of, like little animals, cute animals. Maybe they're a little bit lewd here or there. Like, and I'm blanking on the exact artist to talk about, but a lot of them are just like, there's some that work with, there's an artist I'm following right now that works with like ducks as well, who does the same thing where it's like, he's got very simple work and he's able to turn it into video. And he also sells that art as actual prints and he goes to Comic-Cons and stuff. But the body of the work is more about, visually video content. Now, I'm not great at making content, if anyone can tell, if you look at my stuff, and I'm trying to get better about it. But I would definitely say that is an approach to maybe think about and maybe even like bake that into how you determine what you're going to make as far as designs. Is it easy to maybe turn into, a t-shirt or a silkscreen, like screen printed t-shirt? Because you can do direct-to-garment printing, and it can look good. It can be a little iffy as far as like quality control, depending on who's making it. Because sometimes it just doesn't pop the way like a silkscreen print does, and that means that you're going to have to sacrifice some detail to maybe make something that looks a little better on a shirt. If you're going to go into apparel, that kind of thing. I think baking in the idea of being able to make some of that into some kind of content, depending on like, if you're doing super detailed work, that's not easy to do in an animation sense. Like, even the people who make huge anime series don't get to take that kind of time. So like that can be a kind of a double-edged sword if you're doing really, really detailed work. But if it's a little bit simpler, sometimes that is way easier. Obviously, you can always, if you're kind of going at it from, you want to make content and have some kind of visual identity online, but also go to shows and, go to these markets, sell your product. I'm doing more the latter than the former. I think a lot of people can do both. I think a lot of, if you're doing more video related stuff, figuring out how, and you're starting from scratch, figuring out how what you're doing can fit into that, but also serve as something that can be sold, it's very valuable.
Quick question, sort of on that note and relevant to that. What is it that sort of informs your decision to, because when you're making these character portraits, is there something about what goes into your process for choosing what quote to use or what words to include?
Sometimes I kind of hear the quote and I'm like, yeah, that's the one. I know exactly what to work with. And other times it's more a matter of, I mean, sometimes it's like it's in the zeitgeist already and it's very popular. So you kind of know to use that or to maybe design something around that and make it look different than what everyone else is doing with it. Which, I mean, that's just part of, if you're doing a lot of fan art and there's a lot of people who do that, that's kind of part of the thing, is finding your niche and making a way to make it your own. Sometimes I will do Reddits where I go in and just ask what everyone's favorite is. Because sometimes you'll be surprised. You'll have something in your mind, you'll be like, that's the one. And then you get way more of a response and, selection towards that veers more towards something that maybe you didn't consider.
Sure.
Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Because
sometimes polls too on social media. You can do that as well.
Gotcha. And just looking through some of the pieces that you've made, I mean, it kind of runs the spectrum here of nerd stuff that I recognize very easily, of like Spider-Man and X-Men and things like that, to much more popular media of like Marvel films or something more serious. Like you've got some pieces that are tied to Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah, same. My God, what a emotional roller coaster it is. And oh man, that movie got some tears out of me pretty easily.
Absolutely. I saw it the first opening week and it was just insane to see the reactions of everyone around you. Like 1 second you're watching people fight with a butt plug, and then not even 10 minutes later, it's like the most tear-jerking speech or monologue.
Yeah, exactly. And I do appreciate that about your work, is that it, runs the spectrum of like, this is a fun thing, or this is a thing that is just made to be silly and enjoyable, and that's fine, with some things that are a little bit more prescient, I guess, and a little bit more relevant to modern times. One of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show was your willingness to be upfront about your stances and feelings about things. I think that's incredibly important of any artist, but in your case, have you found it to be a hindrance, or have you experienced any sort of pushback regarding that, as far as sort of the more political and more prominent kind of things that you've made?
I think it's city by city basis. Now, I feel like, and I was talking to an artist recently, and we kind of came to the conclusion that, at least she came to the conclusion that it was about 70% of people at cons are more liberal or left-leaning anyway, or progressive in some way. So you have a 30% of people are maybe not into that. But I mean, if you look at multiple art, or if you look at different artists in Artist Alley and people in the vendor sections too, you're going to see quite a lot of very, LGBT friendly, artwork. I just feel like artists, and I would say audience members, patrons, who are not really, I mean, there's people who don't want politics. And I feel like sometimes that absolutely can play into maybe getting skipped over if someone sees that you're, virulently, or ardently, or I'd say like ardently, lefty or progressive, or, very much against things that are going on. I've certainly seen people who, like, I've gotten into arguments, not too many, but a few, with people who want to talk to me about, I have the Fuck These Fascists shirt, and last year I have this kind of a series I've dipped into. Well, I mean, I'm saying I haven't done much. I did a Chihuahua with Fuck Ice glasses on recently, which is it's been pretty successful. I've been using that to help raise funds for...
Just as a fan of Chihuahuas and the sentiment of Fuck Ice, just thank you so much for making that. It was wonderful to have two things I loved combined into one.
I've been selling that as a t-shirt. I'm starting to sell it as a sticker as well. I just started pre-orders yesterday for people who want to get that, and a print too. And I've already sold some to like people who live in Mexico. I've got some shirts going to London. I've got people across the pond you know, buying this to have the sentiment. So it's not just people who live in the States feeling that vibe, obviously. I mean, I think it's both. Actually, no, I'm not going to say anything negative about it. I think it's great that a lot of artists are putting out, anti-ICE pieces because I did that before. The Fuck These Fascists is a really cute little, almost inspired by, I would say, the facial features are different, but inspired by Fritz the Cat, like the Ralph Bakshi Fritz the Cat. So it's inspired by that, but it's like this little protester who's also got like a Molotov cocktail. I've been told Molotov cocktail. I do like that. But he's in the midst of throwing it, but he's looking kind of goofy and kind of like fun-loving, but it's like he's a cute cat. But he's been forced to fight fascism, just like the rest of us. So that's the ethos of that. A good amount of people are really cool with it and want to buy it as a shirt. And then every once in a while, you get someone like I had one person at a show in Rhode Island not too long ago see that, and they're like, "Well, do you have a one for communists?" And I'm like, Are the communists in the room with us? Like, where is this scourge of communists in the United States? It's like this big boogeyman that people want to act like is just as equally empowered, or in many cases, like has just as much of a stranglehold on American politics as like, more authoritarian leaning folks and those kind of, the Republican Party specifically. But like, they seem people use communists as like a boogeyman, just how it was used back in the 50s and 60s during the McCarthy era. And, no one ever really wanted to. I mean, some people are ardent communists. I'm not. I would say that I still would support more socialist style, social democrat would be a nice change of pace than we've got going on currently. Ways to just doing things that other countries do that helps the people. We have a social safety net, but it's been and is currently being dismantled and, obliterated by the people in power currently. And that's really sad because, other countries have that. I just feel like a lot of people who get really anti-communist, usually when they're using that phrase, they use it as like a catch-all term to mean anything to the left of the center.
It's like a weird catch-all for anything that is, I'm going to use the term un-American, because it, being a fan of history myself, well, maybe not a fan, but just somebody who is familiar with it, like it is very sort of mired in a kind of a Red Scare sort of a feeling to everything nowadays, of like just people are regurgitating the propaganda that they grew up with of like, that's communist and that's bad. Well, why? Or that's socialism and that's bad. Well, why? Can you really articulate why you think it's bad? Like what, and kind of questioning people's understanding of it. Is that a thing that you kind of encounter in your travels?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this guy really, I think it took me a second to be like, try to find like the end of where I could get this guy to maybe not come to my side, but at least understand that things are a little, maybe not what he's thinking, because we started talking about ICE, of course, because that was in November. So things were kind of starting to ramp up. They hadn't gotten as bad as they are currently, but they had started to happen in Chicago, like literally blocks away from where I live currently. And I had to be like, hey, man, like, I know the purpose of these guys is on paper to get rid of, criminal, illegal immigrants. But at the same time, it's like you can't, no matter what happens to undocumented folks, that if they're not white, I feel sometimes is not like, you have to find a story of someone who is a white American civilian, which you're seeing a lot more of because of what happened with both Renee Good and Alex Preddy. In this case, things were happening back in October, November, where I want to say like it was, I don't know if he was a retired Army, but I know he was like a retired older white guy. We're talking like 65 years old, was being yelled at by ICE to move his car. And they dragged him out of his car and had him pinned on the ground and broke a rib. And I'm telling this guy this, and he was kind of taken aback because he didn't know that had happened. So in some cases, I think a lot of people just aren't getting the information. And that could be due to a lot of things. We're recording this in the wake of having a bunch of Epstein files drop, like 3 million. And there's some crazy shit on those files. I think some of it's kind of been blown out of proportion. As far as the thing that I want to bring up is that there is apparently evidence that Peter Thiel Peter Thiel's a big like godfather of not godfather of AI, but he's certainly trying to, he owns Palantir, and he's been partnering and using it, getting different defense contracts, and it's being invested by the U.S. military and being integrated. His systems are to further advance the police state and surveillance state specifically. But he was talking to, because I guess they're buds too, because of course everyone's terrible, is buds. The crazy thing about it, and the thing I want to be harping on, there's a lot of shit we could talk about in those, but those two were talking about how they could advance things like tribalism. So like what we're dealing with the divisiveness in the country is literally they are the architects of it. Like they wanted to get people to be tribalistic. And, they talked to 4chan, one of the guys behind 4chan. We're talking like pre-Gamergate, where we're talking like, 2013, 14 was friends with Epstein too. And he starts doing his thing and creating division and sowing, there's just a lot of evidence that points to the fact that, incels and the red pill community, a lot of this like radicalism pipeline, this alt-right pipeline, is due to, obviously we know a lot of misinformation, but at the onset, it is literally these people planning and figuring out how to create division and how to create more tribalistic society so that things break down and collapse. And we're kind of living through that. And to know that these people did all the horrible things that they did to children is one thing. You think that'd be just the tip of the iceberg, but then you think that would be it? That would be the worst thing they could do? And that's still, I would say, on the level, if we're comparing things, that's still but to think that these same people who did those horrible things were also one of the reasons that things are so horrible right now and that we're so divided is literally because of misinformation campaigns, and influencers that were paid to do what they do over the years has just slowly and steadily created this environment of, like, QAnon was part of it. Like, he started QAnon. Like, there's so much of the people who got misinformed severely got misinformed because it was planned. And, it turns out to be very much a grift, and it's very profitable for a lot of people on the right, more so than the left, to make money off of these people. There's a lot more of a gullibility. There's a lot more of a sense of wanting to belong. And obviously a lot of the like alpha males, sell courses. And anytime someone's selling a course, it's like you need to take a step back and be like, where's my money going? Why is this guy trying to sell his information? Why is he selling it? Why is a single man selling information about how to date women?
And I do agree with you. That is sort of we are watching a misinformation campaign, a propaganda campaign, basically sort of happen in real time, which is an interesting contrast. Just to sort of tie this back around to your artwork, it is an interesting contrast to see how much that has pervaded the sort of social consciousness alongside things that are, from our childhoods, but to sort of see that play out alongside the backdrop of popular media like Star Wars or Andor or take your pick. Like, we are sort of inundated right now with a lot of media that is very anti-fascist, that is very pro-human, that is very sort of in the spirit of a lot of what you're making and what a lot of people feel, right? Like a lot of, we are living in an Orwellian time. So it is interesting to see those sort of two things juxtaposed against each other. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show, is that I do feel that your art is a important sort of reminder, or, hey, by the way, did you forget that this is what we're supposed to feel? This is who the good guys are, right? Like, this is who we are supposed to be. And it's, the times are grim, and it's just interesting to see how things are playing out, and interesting and sad at the same time, just because the world does feel like it has gone so insane.
Yeah, and it's certainly very uncertain to be an artist right now. I haven't done any shows this year yet. Last year was up and down, and I think that's kind of tying back into what we were talking about with, introducing a lot more explicitly anti-fascist political work in, along with the fan art. In some cases, part of the fan art. Like I had a piece. I've got more than a few pieces of Andor, and a mashup piece involving K2SO, where across his chest it says, "This machine kills fascists." So call back to Woody Guthrie, and a literal machine that literally kills stormtroopers. I also had the biggest piece I had last year, the one that did probably the best and got actually a lot of, kind of went micro viral on social media, was one of my normal concept pieces where there's words in the face, a quote piece, but it involved G.I. Robot. And that character took off for a lot of people, but also there wasn't a lot of people doing artwork of said character. So it was a combination of factors that really helped me, but also I have a piece that is all about killing Nazis, like right out the gate. Now, if that's not counterbalanced with a lot of different stuff, I mean, I then have another piece that's like, fuck these fascists. I have another piece with cats recreating Indiana Jones punching a Nazi, throwing paws to the cause. Like, there's multiple, pieces in that oeuvre. I feel like, you can't always control what's going to pop off, and you'll have something that works really well, and you maintain stocking it and making sure that you always have enough because you know what sells and what doesn't. But then it's like the pieces sometimes that you put a lot of effort into and time into and like really want to see take off don't. And that can be kind of a gut punch, But this is all to say that I had a lot of very explicitly anti-fascist stuff last year. And I think it was very much a city by city basis, because started the first show of the year last year was Seattle, a show in Seattle, Emerald City Comic Con. And that show, I was in a weird spot. I was literally down a back aisle. Like, we're talking about like mere feet away from tattoo artists. That's usually not a good spot if you're trying to sell art, right? And I still did really, really well for not being there in a while. New York did amazing there and sold a lot of art. A lot of my political stuff moved there, especially a lot of the originals as well. I've also had a good in more left-leaning cities, I guess, which are most cities, right? But in the more, I guess, bastions of progressivism, you see, I'll have more of those pieces kind of take off. I had a show in Dallas last year, and I still did better than the previous few years. So like, I guess I was doing pretty good up until and a lot of people are kind of starting to report a little bit of like fervor subsiding, I guess, around Comic-Cons back in like August, going into September, going into autumn. But I don't know. I know a lot of people who are also already doing shows and still having pretty good shows because, a lot of people, they save up money, they go to these shows, and they're just, a lot of them want to support artists, so they're buying the stuff that we have. And we always appreciate the hell out of that. Because, I mean, a lot of them certainly could have been using that money to go see celebrities. And that's the thing, too. It's like, it sucks that we have to not only compete with celebrities, but also compete with other artists. And when I say that, it's because they have these promoters keep expanding the show floor in some of these, where it's in some shows, it's like we are capped. We're not going to have more people on the floor. Other ones, it's like, yeah, we expanded by 25%. It's like, why'd you do that? We don't need, 100 more artists on the floor selling stuff. So there's more of us competing over less of a dollar. It's very self-defeating. I wish cons would understand that is not good for the artists. And it usually just feels like it reeks of greed to me, because it's like, you did that so you can get more people to pay for your space, regardless of how that's going to affect them during the show. But
yeah, 100%.
I feel like I'm going off tangent.
I'm actually really glad that you mentioned G.I. Robot, because it was the thing that I intended to sort of tap you about and to sort of ask you about, because I want to say that I don't precisely remember when I sort of tuned in, if you will, to what you're making and your art and everything. But I do feel like G.I. Robot was about the time, right? Like, it was one of the things that stood out to me of like, oh, this is a thing that is saying to kind of use the coin of phrase, to say the quiet part out loud of like, oh, this is how I feel inside about like, I'm mad about this thing, or I'm upset, or passion, if you will. I'm passionate about this thing. To sort of have that writ large in a way that is artistic and striking and really attention grabbing. That was really refreshing to me. And, you know, it is sad that the market is, I'm going to use the word market here, but to see things sort of so saturated with, like, we have artists that are sort of crawling over each other, literally, to try and get people's dollars. And I think that's true of not only the visual art medium, but of the you know, music as well, of just whatever you can do to get attention, of whatever you can do to sort of grab the algorithm for a moment, if you can, to try and make some money. It's a sad state to find artists in, because I feel like there's so much value in what has to be offered that it makes me sad to see it sort of diluted down and sort of forced to compete with each other instead of allowing people to sort of stand out on their own.
Well, it's even harder now than it used to be. Obviously, there's two ways to look at that. In person, obviously, there's what we just talked about, which is oversaturation, expansion of the show floor, putting more people, you know, allowing for more vendors to be at shows. And then, you know, there's more people that you have to compete with. One of the things that unfortunately has happened because of AI is that you're seeing more artists that have to do this because they can no longer support themselves with a day job because they got ousted for their company deciding to use AI instead. That is a big thing. 20% of like creatives lost jobs to AI over the last year. And you're seeing more of those people at shows. I'm not against people trying to do shows. I'm not being like, oh, you know, I'm trying to gatekeep it so nobody else does it. Because I think there's a lot of different people. I think that's the big thing is like, just make sure you're, you know, being different, not just more of the same. But it does suck that that's like, it's becoming like one of the few ways for artists to make money, doing commissions at shows or selling prints, or because I've always considered it like it's a blessing that I'm able to do this and make what I want to make for the most part. Because sometimes you have to hem to stuff that maybe you're not super into. And, you know, if I would love to do more original artwork that has nothing to do with fan art for sure. And I'm, you know, kind of making little strides here and there in doing that. But it's weird to think that this is like one of the last bastions of, you know, like a self-employed artist, because there's just less options than there were when I did this. I started this 10 years ago. And when I started that, like, yeah, I could have been someone who did like UI design or, you know, user UX design, web design, you know, I tried one of those jobs. I wasn't good at it. And I wanted to do more illustration work. And now it's like, I think of like how some people, like there's a whole markets of people just putting AI prompts in and be like, here's a book with your kid as the main character. And it's all like really, you know, AI slop looking, like, you know, wannabe Pixar ass looking, you know, illustrations. And it just looks terrible. That was an entire industry that people were doing more often. And now, and you see it, and that, you know, I do want to call out, I'm not going to say specific people, but I'm going to say, hey, authors, we see you at these shows and we see you with your fantasy book clearly using AI for the cover, and it's some bullshit. Stop that. You know, like,
yes,
there's a lot of that at cons. And I'm just like, why?
Yes. Void Signal is mostly a music podcast, and that's sort of my background and everything. My God, it just crushes my soul to see a poster for come to this event or this club night or this goth night or this whatever or this tour. And if it's got AI on the cover, I'm not going to go. Like, I'm just that straight up, no thanks. I would rather take, and the same goes for musicians and artists who use AI for their cover art. Like, you could make something in MS Paint in 5 minutes that I would respect 100% more than whatever this is.
Yeah,
like,
it's got character. You know, AI art to me is so absolutely soulless. I haven't done a lot of posting about it. I want to do more. I want to say it was 2023 when I started noticing this. There was a group of artists, and see, you can still hear me, right? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
There was a scandal, people can look it up, during Dragon Con where two artists, one with a pretty big name, one where it's less about the name and more about the image. The person who I'm referring to is, I want to say her name's OCR. It's basically this father-daughter duo who swear up and down that they make all the art, and they will rent out like 4 different booth spaces. So it's like this little island. So it's just 4 corners attached together. And they put up the walls, like the more professional art walls, and they'll put up sometimes frame pieces, a lot of glass pieces too, but they're all, or plexiglass pieces. And it's just so clearly AI. I remember being next to them back in like, I want to say it was C2E2 2023. And that was the first time I noticed them. And it's like, there's even like signage where it's just like, please no photos or video. It's like, that seemed a little suspect, doesn't it? Why do you not want people to take photos? Why do you not want people to take video? That's like the last, I mean, yeah, usually it's like an ask. Please ask the artist if you can take a photo. And if you ask me, yeah, I'll be like, most of the time I'll be like, yeah, cool. I get a little weirded out when someone just takes pictures randomly, but to be like, absolutely not. That's just a very overtly, we didn't make this, we're doing a scam kind of thing. Please don't document it. And they got caught. They literally submitted to art. Like, these people were always in the vendor sections and that always costs more money than Artist Alley. They took an Artist Alley table or section that could have gone to someone who was an actual artist. And they had basically did a double switch where they gave the jury artwork for 6 samples of their artwork that was not what they ended up selling. And so when you actually go there, not only was the, quote unquote artist, her and her father don't actually make that art, but that would make more sense for them to actually be there, because that's literally part of the terms of service. We're talking Dragon Con. We're talking like one of the bigger shows of the year in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's like, if you're going to be an Artist Alley, you got to be the one making the art, and it needs to actually be your art. Like, so not only are they not present and having a proxy sell their art, which is already against the terms of service, they are selling nothing but AI art, and it's so obvious. Like, we're talking like Snoopy with 10 fingers, like a lot of, there was like a Rei Ayanami from Evangelion piece, and it's like everything looks fine up until you're just looking at the figure, you're like, okay, the figure seems fine, the torso seems fine, the face seems fine, and then your eye kind of goes around where the arm is, and you're like, why does she have 4 elbows? Why does she, like, her arm bends 4 places? That's not, and it's just like, it's crazy to me that, like, not only are you going to use AI and not even fix it, it would take probably 15 minutes to fix that. You could fix that in Photoshop or any, drawing app using the AI image as the base. And that's not something I would do, but it's like, if you're doing that, why aren't you even editing it? Like, you're just not even caring. And so it's like, you don't care about your audience. You don't care about the people buying this. You're just doing this to make money. You're just pulling the scam. And I'm really hoping that they don't get led into other shows from here on out, because they've kind of been blacklisted to a degree. But some of these shows, they don't care. They still let them in because they spend money.
Right.
And that's I wish more shows were just like completely out of the question, no AI. But then you go to a show and it's like, why are there 20 million booths selling 3D printed dragons? Like, why are there, and the AI is starting to make, I've seen multiple videos of people selling AI art, slop art at farmers markets, more outdoor art shows, art fairs. And it's like, it's not that I expected it at Comic-Cons, but when it's a smaller operation, I would expect there to be a little bit more of a quality control,
Sure. Absolutely. And especially against a thing that is so divisive, right? It's a thing that I worry about happening to a lot of other spaces as well. I personally go to Dark Force Fest, which is in New Jersey. It's a goth festival, and it's filled with it started as a convention, and it's filled with a lot of makers and people who just, artists who make jewelry or make this or make whatever. Over the years of going, even just as the 4 or 5 times that I've gone, I have seen an uptick in, I'm selling these 3D printed things that are just, yes, they're cool. They're awesome. They look rad, and I pick them up and I'm amazed, and I'm like, this is so rad. This is so cool. But I also am keenly aware of like, well, you didn't make this and you didn't design this, and the effort you put into putting this thing on this table is very close to zero. You just sort of downloaded a thing and printed a thing, and now you're asking people $10 for it or whatever it is. And it just seems so dishonest and seems so just, like, I want to use the term charlatan, right? Like, you're just you're misrepresenting what you're offering as a thing you made, and you did not. Like, I know that you didn't. And that's just the saddest part of it for me, is that like, well, I'm not going to buy this from you because I know you just downloaded a blueprint or whatever. I'm going to go over to the next table to the person who like, oh, they made this thing or this skull or this face or whatever. And you can tell that it's drawn by a person because it's fucking not symmetrical. And it just, you can tell that a human made this. Like, that person's going to get my money, not whatever this is.
Yeah, and I just want more people to have that kind of discernment because, no artist deserves your money because they're not putting any effort into it. Us artists are putting effort and time, sacrifice. Time that we could have been out and having fun. Instead, like, we had to work on art, and I think it goes to say that it's very similar in music communities because clearly a lot of people spend time working on their music that is time that they could have been out, socializing or partying. And that's just a sacrifice of time that you make to make your art. And now we're seeing the same thing with music as visual art too, where there's a great music creator. I'm all about, so when I draw, I have to have something on in the background. And sometimes it's music. More recently, I will just get on YouTube and have a video essay playing out for a few hours while I work on stuff. So like that way I get to learn some things while I'm working on pieces. And there's a guy, as a music, you probably know of this guy, Adam Neely.
Doesn't ring any bells now.
He's more of like a jazz bassist, but he puts out content on YouTube and he does a lot of video essays about music. They're very interesting. He did a whole thing about AI music and where that's going and how it's affecting artists. And some of the numbers are staggering. Like 25% of music on Spotify right now is AI generated. What that means? Oh, it gets worse. What that means is that 25% of the revenue is now not going to real human artists. It's going to the prompters, or in some cases, like there have been deals that people who make this music work out with Spotify so that they can be put on playlists and, be more ubiquitous on the platform, but also not like they don't get paid as much. So royalties down. So Spotify almost prefers those kind of things. So it's like they have to shell out less money. Like Spotify pisses me off on multiple levels. We could talk about that all day, where it's just like you are doing all these things to not pay the artists who made your platform work. Your platform would literally not work without the music of real human artists, and you're just shitting on them all day, every day.
Yes, it definitely is. I don't want to keep you too long, and I could sit and talk to you all day about a dozen topics. So I do want to go ahead.
What's up? Yeah.
Real quick, is there a use case for AI where you feel it would be okay to use it? Because I'm generally pretty against it myself, but I've heard other artists and authors sort of explain that they use it as a structure, like I use it to quickly build a background or, do some other sort of component. Is there a use case where you feel like, okay, this is fine, or this is acceptable to me?
It seems like we were getting inundated for a very short, brief period about how it was helping scientists, and it was helping to, or being utilized in ways that helped people in those fields do their job better. And I would be all for that. Why can't I do my taxes? Like all these things that would make sense for AI. Why the fuck is it being used for creative fields? Why is it's just flooding the zone and oversaturating AI slop? And me and every other actual artist has to deal with it because now we have to compete with that, not only in person at markets, but also online because of the algorithm. As far as I've heard of people using it to like photo bash or like kind of come up with a concept. I just don't support that. I just don't think you should use it at all. And most of it is mostly due to the fact that we do have the data on what it's doing to the environment, and it's not good. That comes into a real problem when you look at how all these data centers are affecting the people who live around them in terms of boosting their energy bills up way higher than there should be, fucking up local water reservoirs because it uses so much water to cool, to the point where like we literally have the WHO is talking, like the World Health Organization is talking about generative AI possibly bringing on water bankruptcy. Like you won't be able to shower as much, or your access to clean water for things like dishes, showering, drinking is going to be cut. And for what? So you can look at a woman who has 3 breasts, or like you can look at
Yes.
there's AI porn, obviously. So you're telling me I can't drink clean water because Ice Nine Kills wants to have some AI bullshit on the T-shirt?
Yeah.
I know they were in the hot seat for a second, and that guy has continued to defend their use of AI. That's some bullshit. I feel like we were talking about that in a second, where it's like promoters are one thing. When the bands do it, it's like, really? And I know you've probably seen your fair share of people who are like, this is a song I made with AI. It's a metal song. And it's like, it sounds so terrible. There's
you
can't really go ahead.
Just real quick, and especially in the, my background is mostly sort of the industrial music genre. So people who are, have traditionally kind of embraced machines and machine sounds and, played with the idea of what music could be. So I do see a lot of people sort of delving into that and being like, oh, I made this thing with AI. Isn't it, awesome and in the vein of this genre that we're in? No, it fucking isn't. No, it's not. This is, I feel that art is a human expression, and a machine will not be able to imitate it at all. And I've seen AI artwork in my life that I've been like, that's kind of cool, but it never speaks to me in the way that, knowing a person made this. This is all these intricate details and these idiosyncrasies that you find in it. A person put those there because they mattered to them. And it just makes me kind of sad that this is the state in which we find ourselves. And it's just constantly being used to generate garbage, actual garbage. People who are like, I spent several hours refining this AI image of this person that, okay, great. Fucking wonderful. I'm glad we spent so much water and so much whatever to generate this trash that, you can appreciate for 5 minutes before you're on to the next thing. It just makes me really bummed out.
No, I'm the same boat. I can't believe there's people out there who want to do that. I think there's some artists, I've heard of Holly Herndon. I haven't listened to her music. She apparently composes music and has worked with AI to do so, but that's more of she's not putting a prompt in and just getting whatever pushes out. She's actually doing some work there. It's unfortunate that someone who's actually doing that work is going to bat to defend AI use. Mostly after it was revealed that Bandcamp is not allowing AI music on their platform, which is fucking great. Why can't we have more people like that? It's always the little guys trying to do it, and then the big guys like Spotify are like, yeah, we love it. Have you met people who like AI music?
I have not, no. I've not met anybody who's been like, oh, I fucking love this or whatever.
I haven't met any that like AI music, but I have artist friends that I stayed with on some shows because, we got to cut down costs for hotel rooms, and they're watching AI generated video and it's funny. I'm like, I lose so much respect for you every second that you're watching that and being entertained by it. I don't understand how people are into that at all. I don't get what's great about it. No one, oh, okay. I can't remember. There was some comedian who was just like, yeah, it made Rick and Morty, or it made Rick from Rick and Morty fart. It just made a fart joke for you. But it's like that probably already exists, and it was actually someone took time to animate it and make that elsewhere because it's based off of art that already it's just all based off of art that already exists, and someone put that effort into elsewhere.
I know a ton of artists and a ton of bands and things like that. I did know and see somebody who they're in a small up and coming band, and they are the sort of artist that I made this show for, of I want to help you create more of your thing you're doing that's original and cool and interesting and whatever, but they'll repost something that is very clearly AI generated, and I'm just sort of like, man, what are you doing? It feels like, you're helping the enemy, or you are sort of betraying the spirit of what you should be doing, I guess, as an artist. And it makes me sad in a ways. And like you said, I do end up losing respect a little bit because you should know better, I guess.
It's like when they know it's AI. Like my parents are, for the most part, good about the media that they share, but my mom every once in a while does like, oh, this video, and I have to point out, oh, mom, that's AI. And it's just like, yeah, I get it. They're a little bit older. They're not seeing the artifacting that's going on with the background. But the proliferation of it on these platforms because of no regulations means that people are seeing things and believing it's real. And maybe that's not so harmful for a cute cat, but maybe it is harmful when it's used to like show a protester doing something that he didn't, or in a lot of, I mean, God, you follow me on Instagram. Instagram is owned by Meta. Meta owns Facebook. Like I have, I've witnessed some just really straight up, very virulently racist AI slop where it's just utilized to make a stereotype of this kind of person, and it's used to hate on. And it's like, this is the end game for a lot of this, and it's very sad that people are consuming it at all.
Well, I do want to go ahead and put the last question of the show to you, which is just, what is something that you have been enjoying recently? And your answer can be anything, book, movie, TV show. Just what is something that you were jazzed about when you wake up in the morning?
I've been really enjoying working on not so much visual art, some music. I'm making music as well, but I haven't really released any of it, so I've been just sitting on it. And music production is just a lot of fun, which is another reason why I have such issues with AI, because it's just like, just crack open Ableton or Pro Tools or Logic or any of these programs and just learn how to do it, because there's way more fun learning how to do sound design, I think, than putting prompts in. As far as music, I've really quite enjoyed, there's this black duo out of UK called Sault, S-A-U-L-T. They have put out some wonderful albums. I think Acts of Faith is really interesting because it's like every track is more like, maybe not a full song, but it's more like a vibe. So it's like maybe 2 movements tops. Maybe it's just one movement of just a really good, a few minutes of this vocal melody over this really great groovy bass line over like a really interesting throwback to like Motown kind of sound. And then their more recent records are just straight up like G-funk oriented, and I've been really into the work of Tiny. He is a producer who worked with Bad Bunny, who's worked with Raul Alejandro, who's worked with a bunch of different reggaeton artists. He had an album that's old now. It's like 2023, so it's already like fucking 3 years old almost. But it's called Data. It's great. There's some great tracks on that. When producers put out, records, it's obviously a lot of features of artists doing the singing, so that there's some vocals to grasp onto if they're not like an instrumental producer. If they are instrumental producers, I've been really enjoying like going back and re-listening to the work of like Max Cooper, who does a lot of really interesting sound design. I'm trying to think as far as going back and re-listening to and getting back into like Fugazi, if we're talking about like old school, like hardcore punk music that kind of is subversive and doesn't pull, like you'll have a song where it has more of a like, you have your waiting rooms, right? But then, and Smallpox Champion and like these songs that hit really hard and are very like, here's distortion. We're doing like 4 on the floor, but like the music's very pumping. We've got 2 different vocalists shouting. It's great. But then they're really good about pulling back and restraining and having a lot more like melodic instrumental sections that you don't expect them to do, especially in their later work. They have an album called The Argument. Have you ever listened to it? From 2001?
Not. No.
Are we ever much of a Fugazi fan?
Like, it's a band I've heard a couple of times, but not anything I've done a deep dive on, because it was just kind of outside the genres that I kind of play with, I guess.
What have you been listening to?
The thing I've been enjoying recently, music-wise, is an artist who is not really an artist. Death Pixie. I don't know if you're familiar or not, but it's sort of a group of 4 to 5 producers, electronic music producers, who came together to create an entity that is not themselves. Death Pixie is not a person.
Active.
Yeah, it is presented by like there are animators involved who like they draw Death Pixie and they presumably hire a vocalist to give voice to this character. But this is sort of an amalgamation of people who are just creating this sort of musical entity. But aside from that, like I've been listening to a lot of like Health and sort of industrial-y sort of a thing. But I mean, that said, my tastes run the spectrum. Like I can get get down on anything as long as it sort of speaks to me. I'm a big lyrics guy. So like if something has something meaningful to say, I'm definitely going to tune in to it and be involved in it.
Have you ever listened to Lump or Laura Marling? She's a really great.
I don't know either of those names.
And we're talking about collectives. Did you ever listen to Hers Collective? HIRS?
No.
Oh, yeah, it's really great. It's very pro-trans, very, very noise, very, very loud, very heavy. But, and okay, there's another one too. It's Zulu. Have you ever listened to Zulu?
No.
It's like a grindcore band. A grindcore, that's what I'm thinking of. It's like an all-black grindcore band that every once in a while you'll have little interpolations or working in these intermissions for songs that are more soul music based, and then you just get this nasty, just rough around the edges transition from this echoey, reverb drenched soul sample, and then it's just this grindcore that just beats you in the face for a few minutes. It's been years since I listened to them, but they're great too. Yeah, go ahead.
I am such a fan of the mashing up of genres and styles. And two bands I'm going to mention very quickly. Zeal and Ardor is I've seen them described as satanic slave metal, but it's sort of a southern kind of heavy kind of slave songs, I guess, is there, but that's kind of what I've seen it described as, and that is kind of what fits it, is the sort of down home, passed down from person to person, and sort of a fun combination of all those things. I use the term fun very loosely. That's very serious music with a very sort of serious place that it is born from. But that, along with the other artist I wanted to mention that is doing something interesting, Zed's Dead is an artist, EDM-y, sort of a drum and bass, maybe dubstep, I don't know. But again, sort of a mix of rhythm and blues and soul and that sort of a spirit mingled with EDM and dubstep sort of styles to create something that just feels very fresh and very like sort of new. Witch House as well is like a weird mashup of like, we're going to have some like kind of chill, ambient, down tempo kind of stuff with, there's a rapper in the background and you can't make out what he's saying. And there's a hip hop beat and it doesn't matter what he's saying because he's just the background noise for this, very forward centered piece that's very touching and very melodic and very intimate and human at times. So I'm a big fan of like, crossing genres and doing mashups and doing, combinations of things.
I was going to say, in that, talking about Zed's Dead, do you listen to Fredigan at all?
No, don't know that name.
He's an EDM producer. He's actually quite musically trained at least. Like, he does a lot more live looping than you would expect. Like, he's got a phenomenal Tiny Desk concert that he did for NPR a while back. But he also just does really insanely good beats and has a lot of great people work with him, like Denzel Curry, who's a phenomenal rapper. Skepta is more like a UK drill rapper. And I know his work's fantastic if you're into EDM. I actually got to see Fortet recently, who's a older guy. He's like in his 50s now, so he's like an old head, but he's been doing like more sound design, like we're talking like his records from the early 2000s. He was like out opening up for Radiohead during Kid A, and that was before you ever expected. Like, that's a time where, like, 2010s is when you really saw, like, Girl Talk and, like, all these, not bands, but one-man producer shows where it's, like, laptop, production. This guy was doing that way before it was cool. Or, like, what the fuck? This guy doesn't have a band behind him? Like, that kind of thing. And he was doing a lot of sampling, too, where it's just, like, this. Some of his earlier records are just nothing. It's like 300, 400 different samples put together in a way that's extremely melodic and musical. And it's like, that's not MIDI. He's not he's arranging these samples and he's doing a lot to it to make it work musically together, but he's not like performing any of it or, clinking it out on a keyboard and Frankensteining it. Like, that's just nuts to me. I got to see him live and it was fantastic. But.
Nice. Yeah, I'm into that. And I will definitely follow up on a lot of things that you mentioned here, just because that's a thing I admire about art and just pushing into new boundaries and doing things, mashing things together that maybe seem like they shouldn't go together, but somehow they end up working alongside each other really well. I always answer the question myself. So just real quick, the thing that I've been enjoying recently, I've given a lot of heavy answers lately, so I'll keep it light for this one. But I've been watching and enjoying the series Mr. Robot. I don't know if you've seen that with Rami Malek and Christian Slater, but it was a TV series from years ago now, I guess. But just the sort of Fight Clubby kind of vibes mixed with hackers, and just sort of is very critical of our current society and our current sort of state of the world. You know, years ago, pre-pandemic times, this was a show that was kind of challenging the status quo and being like, hey, doesn't anybody else kind of realize the path we're on, and that we're sort of, you know, spiraling towards this dystopian future very quickly, and sort of seeing those big institutions and large ideological state apparatuses sort of taken on and addressed, you know, front and center in a TV show, in a piece of mainstream media that's on, you know, USA or whatever fucking network, I don't know, is refreshing to be like, oh, okay, there are people who have infiltrated, you know, the upper echelons of TV production or whatever, and they have managed to put out this message to the rest of us of like, hey, you know, shit's not great. I've been really enjoying that for that reason of just like, you know, here's a little bit of a looking glass on where we find ourselves currently. And I'm a fan of most art and media that does that. That is like, you know, here's the hard truth about, you know, whatever thing.
Have you watched Severance?
No, I haven't, but that is a name I've heard mentioned to me like 3 or 4 times from trusted people.
I'd recommend it. It's kind of crazy because now I'm starting to think about like, oh my God, I just remember I was in Richmond last year staying with some friends and watching the finale. So like they've had 2 seasons out. The second season just ended. It uses a very kind of dystopian, like late stage capitalism, but taking, you know, place in present day concept and premise to kind of talk about like work-life balance and how that exists or doesn't exist, or, you know, isn't wanted by the people who employ you much of the time. And what's the extent, like where can we push that boundary and make it like even more ultra capitalistic? And it's very well shot. It's very well acted. It's very well directed. They really keep you on your toes for the first season. I feel like the second season ends in a way that's still fairly good. I don't know what they're going to do with the third season. It's more lighthearted, but have you watched Abbott Elementary? That show's fucking hilarious.
No, I have not. No.
That's a really good, like, you know, mockumentary style, like sitcom. And honestly, we're getting to the point where I just really need to go back and rewatch a lot of Christopher Guest films just so I could watch all of Catherine O'Hara's performances, especially Best in Show. I think it'd be great to go back and rewatch like Waiting for Guffman again. Well, for a while. Have you ever seen Revenge?
Yes, I have. I'm a big horror fan, so absolutely I can engage with you on this topic pretty well. Revenge was a great movie.
Yeah, I loved how much the practical effects were all up in that movie. Obviously, like The Substance as well, you know, her follow-up movie.
Yeah, 100%.
Bring Her Back was fantastic. That was like how did Sally Hawkins not get like a single like supporting actress nomination, because she did such a good job in that movie.
Yes, 100%.
And the sound design, even, I'm sorry, that was really edgier seat sound design, especially with the knife scene. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes. It takes a lot for a film to make me deeply uncomfortable, and that movie did. Like, it was so effective at what it did while also just doing something different. You know, like, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. You can certainly do something or create something that's similar to what we've already seen, but just a fresh spin, you know, a new take, a different outcome. And that goes such a long way for me. Like, it will endear a movie to me. Sort of on that note, Keeper is a horror film that I saw not that long ago that it's does does things that are kind of similar to what we've seen before, but just enough of a fresh coat of paint of like, this is really interesting, and I'm so engaged. I'm a big appreciator of that kind of a thing.
So you'd recommend Keeper then? I was curious because Osgood Perkins, it seems like he's very iffy. I mean, I'm still kind of feeling a little betrayed from how Longlegs just kind of didn't deliver for me.
Okay, I didn't see Longlegs. I only saw Keeper, and from what I saw of it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was, fresh and different enough. So I can't really speak to what he might have done in the past. Just really quick to the new Sam Raimi movie. I grew up loving Evil Dead and Army of Darkness and just Sam Raimi movies in general. Watching his new movie, Send Help, I couldn't help but notice in the background, there's a portrait of Bruce Campbell. But man, what a blast it was. I went and saw it in theaters, and I don't go to the movies often, but it captured that real spirit of what's this movie going to throw at me next? I don't know. And I'm such a fan of that, of keeping me on my toes.
I actually recently rewatched Evil Dead 2. Obviously still holds up great. I think a lot of the campiness, maybe, it's not a movie I've rewatched a whole lot. So it's probably been I would say, God, I'm old. I'm 41. So it's probably been a good decade or so since I've actually sat and watched Evil Dead 2. The color does so much in that movie, how they've lit things, the color design, the set design. I feel it's that unsung hero of the movie, But on top of that, it's just it just sells the camp so hard, and it works. It's just it to me is the best of the series. I haven't gone and watched Ash vs. Evil Dead. Is that worth watching?
I watched maybe some of the first season, and I enjoyed it as a fan of the films, but I ended up not finishing it because I just sort of lost interest. It wasn't really the same tone, I guess. There's something about that content that when you're stretching it out for the purposes of a long play TV series kind of a thing, I just feel it doesn't hold up all that well. I feel you have to have really meat and potatoes kind of content to be able to make it work over a series versus just here's an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever.
Yeah, I could agree with you because I only saw the first episode and I was I don't know. I think at the time it wasn't available because I didn't have Stars. So I was able to see the first as a trial run. I know it got picked up by a few different streamers. I don't know what it's on now. I feel as far as media, when it comes to good horror movies that came out recently, did you watch When Evil Lurks?
Yes, I did. What a brilliant movie.
That's brutal.
Yes, it is. It made me deeply uncomfortable. I have some difficulty watching stuff with we'll just call it animal danger. And sort of to see, I haven't seen too many possession or demonic possession movies that are well, what if it's in a dog? Man, that took it to a new level of ooh, this makes me uncomfortable. And this makes me feel unsettled or unsafe in some way. Really brilliant for that reason.
Yeah, and a lot of really practical effects.
Yes,
well.
A very sticky, moist movie to watch. Yeah, 100%.
And I also just love the point of it. It's hey, you should maybe listen to women. It's these two guys just keep fucking up because they're just not listening to all the people around them, mostly women, who are telling them what the rules are. They live in a world where the rules are there, and they do such a good job world building too, because it's you get to explain what's going on, but you do it. It's done so in a natural way where there's nothing super expository that feels unnatural, right? There's a scene where one of the little girls is talking to this older woman, the grandma, on the back of the seat of a car during a drive, and it's you learn how people deal with the demons through that conversation that she's having. It's just it's such a natural way to put that information out there. And then in the end they fuck up because they're literally not following the rules. They only have themselves to blame.
that is such a thing that gets on my nerves so bad, of just like, here's a bunch of exposition out of nowhere. Like, oh man, nothing sours me on a movie faster than just like, here's a character who's got a monologue about a thing for several minutes in a way that no human person would do. Like, it ruins it for me, like in so many ways, of just like, this is just such like contrived. And the moment that I'm pulled out of it, it's hard for me to go back in and like really appreciate anything else it has to offer.
I'm trying to think of like other really good world building in movies as well. We could talk forever about great horror movies. Did you watch I Saw the TV Glow?
I did see that. I was not as crazy about it as I guess I expected it to be, because something about it for me just didn't land. I just found myself a little bored by it, I guess. I mean, not to throw any shade towards the film itself or anything that it's doing, I think that's more of a commentary on me as a viewer, of just like, I need things a little bit more quick of pace or laid out to me a little bit more plainly, I guess.
It kind of ends with a very kind of downer ending, but I mean, a lot of it's like just seeing time pass with this character and seeing them not be the person who they clearly are meant to be, and like the mundanity of that, but also like the prison that this person puts himself in by not choosing to pursue that identity. I mean, I've never seen a movie that made me aware of the horrors of body dysphoria or gender dysphoria. That's like extreme. That part alone for me sells the movie, because it's just horror of a different kind, and it's really unfortunate because all the fucking the bigots who need to know what that's like are not going to sit through that movie, or they're going to sit through it and complain that it wasn't scary enough. So it's just but I quite enjoyed that.
I'm a big horror movie fan myself. I could sit and talk about them all day and about their value and what they bring to the table as far as subversive viewpoints. A byproduct of a lot of slasher films, I feel, is we are tied to a close kind of third person narrative that's maybe from a viewpoint that is not our own, right? Like, we're tied to female protagonist, the last girl or whatever. And I think there's so much value in viewing things from different viewpoints. I think that's the real value of a lot of horror, is just like, here's a viewpoint that is not your own, and how do you feel about it? How do you feel about it, how it plays out after it's over? I think Midsommar is a brilliant example of, we're going to take this male character and he's going to get sexually assaulted, he's going to be taken advantage of, and he's not a great person, right? But
yeah,
does he deserve this?
Does he deserve that? Yeah. No.
And
that's a very unfortunate character, because you're right. Yeah. And there's been talk about it too. It's like, people are like, oh yeah, that asshole deserves. It's like, did he deserve to be sexually assaulted? He was literally drugged and then put into a situation where he really couldn't do anything else but have sex with this person.
Yeah. Exactly. And the way it's filmed and shot, of like, he's wandering around and he's confused. And I mean, I found myself watching it in theaters and being like, man, if this were a female character instead of a male character, how would this audience feel about this? And nonetheless, I love any movie that as soon as the credits roll, like, you are challenged as an audience member of like, how do you feel about this? And because there's that sense of like, good for her. But also like, well, a bad thing happened to a lot of other people who were maybe shitty, maybe not great, like not a person you'd want to hang out with on the weekend, but like, did they deserve this thing to happen to them? And I love that sort of moral quandary of like, how do you feel?
Did you watch Eddington?
Yes, I did. That was yet another movie of like, and I love Ari Aster for that. I think of just like, how do you feel about this? Oh, fuck, I don't know. Conflicted.
It's like, you want to like Joaquin Phoenix at first, but it's like the point of view is like the asshole right-wing sheriff who's not following orders and has a beef to settle with Pedro Pascal's mayor. And then it's just like, at first it's like, it feels like an episode of South Park, like it feels very like jokey, kind of surreal, but like there's a lot of like, gags. And then it becomes Fargo within the first 45 minutes, and then it just gets dead serious, but then it just starts spiraling out of control. I love that movie, but it's also just like that movie ends and you kind of have an idea what he's going for, but it's like there's different ways that you can interpret it. Like his interview around that time, his interview questions, when people asked what's this movie about, and he's basically like, oh, this is the loss of a consensus reality among Americans. To me, those assassins at the end, that is like, we're all seeing this and taking this from the point of view of this kind of right-wing sheriff. To me, those assassins were not actually that hardcore. That's like the point of view of someone who thinks that Antifa is all super soldiers, right? Like, that's just like, there's a lot that I don't think you can trust what the main character is actually experiencing, the literal what's going on with the main character in the movie, with that movie especially. And it's kind of following the same lines, because I absolutely loved it. It's a very divisive film. Beau is Afraid.
Yes, I did quite like that movie as well. A hard watch for me personally. Like, I've seen that movie twice, and I love Ari Aster, but both times I've seen that movie, I had to just, like, as soon as the credits roll, I need to turn the TV off and I have to go to sleep, because I'm just mentally and emotionally exhausted. Like, sort of social anxiety that's on offer. Like, and I've watched that movie with other people too who didn't, had normal upbringings or whatever. And, the scene of, like, his phone is ringing and it goes to voicemail, and, like, the long pause of, like, man, my anxiety was through the roof during that time, because I was like, if it goes to voicemail, it's going to be so much worse. And, like, just there's something deeply unsettling about Ari Aster's horror that even in a film like Eddington, where I'm like halfway through it and I'm like, this makes me uncomfortable. Like, the way these people are being people to each other makes me feel not okay and not right with it. Man, it's so powerful.
There are so many great little parts of that film. And then I think that's one of those movies where it's just like, once it ends, people are really like, what the fuck did I just sit through for 3 hours? But I mean, it's determinism, right? Like, this was always going to happen. Things were always going to suck for Beau, but there was also like those points, like you're talking about were you talking about like the lawyer, when his mom's lawyer called? It's like, you have to make it here immediately. And it's just like, he's in a position where the people he's staying with will not let him leave, and it's just so much anxiety and tension.
Yes.
Of him not trying to say the wrong thing around them.
Yeah, not only that, but like the scene early on in the film of, like, he's at his therapist and, like, his phone rings and it's like, mom calling or whatever. But, like, man, to me, like, as somebody who experienced that anxiety of, like, ooh, I don't want to answer this call, or, that trepidation of, like, ooh, what's waiting for me on the other line or on the other end of this phone call, man, just how effective it was at capturing that anxiety of, like, fuck, I don't want to deal with this, or I don't want to face this down. I sort of love, and I mean, like, it makes me uncomfortable, but I kind of love it for that reason of, like, the social anxiety horror of, like, here you are in this situation that you can't get out of because you're too polite, or you're too nice, or you're too whatever, or you're just going to go through with what is expected of you. Did you see the original See No Evil?
It was a Speak No Evil, right?
Speak No Evil. Yeah, there you go.
So here's the thing. I haven't seen it. I've seen so much stuff about it that I know exactly what happens, but I'm also just like, I know watching it is a whole different experience. I haven't seen it, but yeah, I know what happens. It sounds ridiculous, but at the same time, it's just like, yeah, this all happens because these people never stop to actually, like, point out all the fucked up things happening around them and are trying to be nice about it. And it's just like,
and it lingered with me for so long, because it was just like, this is what happens when you don't speak up in a room. Yeah. Like, if you just fucking let things go, like, this is how insane it could become, I feel. Yeah, that was another great movie that just left a positive impression on me. Well, I don't want to say positive. I guess it was kind of a negative impression, but still left an impression of just like, damn, this is how fucked up humans can be, I guess. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I will go ahead and wrap up. But I want,
But I was afraid. The only thing I'm going to say about that movie, I really do feel that play scene, a lot of people lose it at that. They don't want to watch that. They're like, what the fuck am I watching at this point? I think that's like the most effective scene in the movie, where it's just this dreamlike quality. It's super surreal. He does such a good job at setting up, to me, one of the best jokes Ari Aster has ever written, which is just, you watch this dude do this entire thing in his head, or, this whole reality he's built. For a minute, you're almost just like, okay, is he really experiencing these things? He's having this adventurous life and having, kids and everything, and then losing his children and then finding his way back to his children. And then you see all of that. That's like a 30-minute joke just to get to, but how did you have us if you didn't have sex, Dad? And it just takes him out. And it's like so good. It's so funny.
Yeah. But I love that scene and that whole sequence for the fact of just, here's a what could have been. Here's a what, how life could have played out. And this would still be preferable to what he is given. And just, that's a very nuanced movie, as most of Ari Aster's movies are. I love and appreciate them so much for the way they stimulate my mind. Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, I love his movies. I would sit and rewatch blah, 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 such and such. No, I wouldn't. Like, I only need to see them X amount of times, and that's okay. But I can still appreciate what they're offering for intellectual reasons, I guess.
What did you think of Together? Did you watch that one?
Oh, I haven't seen that. I've got it and I'm going to watch it, but I just have not watched it as of yet. Is it good?
I think it does. It has some scenes that are very terrifying, but then I feel like it kind of doesn't work as well at the very end. So I wish it was one of those movies where I wish it was better, and I wish it was maybe a little bit less CG on some of the parts. But there's also some just practical stunts and effects that they do that are pretty well performed. Like there was actually some contortionist training that Alison Brie had in order to make some of her movements look freakier in instances where she had to do her own stunts, which is pretty cool.
Oh, okay. I'm looking forward to watching it then in that case. Did you see Sinners from this past year?
Oh, yeah. I saw that twice. I unfortunately didn't get to see it in IMAX, which would have been great. That's a movie where, like, literally the print is actually kind of dark. So if you're in a place that doesn't have a good camera, like the first time I saw it was in a movie theater that had, like, blown out speakers, and the image was, like, I don't know, like, brightness was down to, like, half. I was just like, what happens in this movie theater? Why is this terrible? I can tell this is a great movie. I'm just not experiencing some of the best parts of it. And then I got to see it in a movie theater that had much more surround sound. So like when you're watching, the scene and all of that music swirls around you as like there's like a Dolby Atmos 3D feel to how you're experiencing that scene is fucking perfect. Like, yeah. And then it's just really satisfying to watch a bunch of Klan members get just murked.
Oh yeah.
That's on all cylinders.
That was my favorite part of the movie, is that I remarked this to my lady friend as we were leaving, of like, man, not only did I get to see a great vampire movie with all these great, interesting characters, but, icing on the cake, you get to watch a bunch of, white supremacist motherfuckers get murked at the end. I feel on cloud nine walking out of this movie. Like, damn, I feel so satisfied. Yeah, it was fantastic. Okay.
But I can let you go.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. But I wanted to thank you again so much for your time. It has been a pleasure to chat with you. I will let you know when this goes out.
Void Signal enter courtesy of Processor. Visit processor2.bandcamp.com for more Processor. Void Signal is powered by people and ad-free. Visit voidsignal.net or patreon.com/voidsignal to support the Void Signal project. Stay safe, stay loud, and follow Void Signal on the socials.